Alright, so today we are going to be learning how to model our operations of integers using a number line. I have a number line up here. Remember, 0 is what we call the origin of the number line, and our positive numbers are to the right, and our negative numbers are to the left. To help us with our number lines, we're going to think of a car taking a trip. The road is the number line, and each integer is going to tell us where to go. So I've got my green car here. My car is going to drive on my number line, and the integers are going to tell us which direction we're driving. Let's take a look at addition. With addition, my car is going to start from 0. So if I see an addition problem, I'm automatically going to draw myself a line at 0. If I have a positive integer, that's going to tell me that I'm going to be moving the car forward. If I have a negative integer, I'm going to move the car backwards or in reverse. So I have kind of a graphic organizer to show us what our addition problems will look like. So I have my first integer is going to be my first trip. And my second integer is going to be my second trip. And then wherever that car ends is going to be the answer, the solution to my addition problem. So let's take a look at an example and see what it looks like on a number line. So my first example here is a positive 4. And I'm going to be adding a positive 3. Remember, that first integer, that 4, is going to tell me what I'm doing for my first trip. So I've already made my line at 0. And now I'm going to move 4 spots. That's a positive number, so I'm moving forward. So I'm going to go 4 stops, 4 marks forward. That's the end of my first trip, so I'm going to draw another line. But I'm not done yet. I have a second trip. On my second trip, I'm moving 3 positive spaces. Remember, positive integers are going to move my car forward as well. So I'm picking up right where I left off, and I'm going to move 3 spaces. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to move 3 spaces, continuing forwards, because I've got another positive number. It looks like after I've moved 3 spots, I'm ending at a positive 7. So my solution, where that car is ending, is a positive 7. Alright, so I'm ready to look at my next couple of examples, and before I even start drawing, I'm going to start by just circling all of my first trips in my green, because I like to make sure that I'm color coding it. And then I'm going to circle my second trips in that blue color, so we can make sure that we keep them separate. I'll be all set to draw my number lines afterwards. So all those second integers are getting circled in blue. So now I'm going to look at my next example. I have a positive 5 and I'm adding a negative 6. Remember, those positive integers are going to move my car forward, and I always start from 0 for addition. So I'm going to draw my line at 0. I'm moving 5 units to the right, forward, and then that's the end of my first trip. Now when I'm ready for my second trip, I'm going to be moving negative 6 units, so I'm going to move my car backwards 6 spaces. So I'm going to actually go back right past where I was going, but I have another unit to go, and I'm going to stop at that negative 1. And I don't have any more integers to add, so that negative 1 is actually my final answer. Alright, let's look at our next example. Now I've got a negative 7 and I'm adding a 3. For that first trip, I've got a negative number. Remember, that moves my car backwards, starting at 0. I'm going to go back 7 spaces, 7 units. End of my first trip. And for my second trip, I'm going to go forwards 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. And then that's the end of my second trip. I'm ending at negative 4, so negative 4 is my answer. Alright, last example here, I have a negative 8, and I'm adding a negative 2. So again, I'm going to start my car at 0. And those are negative numbers, so I'm going to move backwards in reverse. So I'm going to go back 8 spaces. That's the end of my first trip. And then my next trip is also a negative, so I'm going to pick up right where I left off and go back 2 spaces. And then that ending point, that negative 10, is the solution to my addition problem, my sum. Alright, so now that we have gone over how to add on a number line, our next slide is going to walk us through subtraction. Remember, we don't like to subtract. We use our rules to turn it into an addition problem. Remember, that's the same number plus the opposite of the second integer. Those positive integers are still moving the car forward, and the negative integers are still moving the car in reverse. We just have to change them to addition first thing. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to change all of my problems, because I know that all of these are subtraction problems. I'm going to change them all to addition. So I'm going to take the same first number, so I'm going to write 4. I'm going to change it to adding, and then I need the opposite of that 3, so it's going to be adding a negative 3. I can use those parentheses to make it a little bit more clear. Let's do it for the second one. I keep my same positive 5. I'm going to add the opposite of the second integer. That was a negative 6, so now it's going to be a positive 6. On my third example, I'm using the same negative 7, and I'm going to add the opposite of a positive 3, which is a negative 3. And on my last example, I've got that negative 8, and I'm adding the opposite of negative 2, which is a positive 2. Yeah. Alright, so now that I have all of my addition problems, I'm going to go through and circle all of my first trips. So my first integer is my first trip. I'm going to use green just like I did on the last slide. Go through and circle all of those. And then my second trip, I was using blue. So I'm going to go through and circle my second trips so I can keep my arrows straight in my mind. And now I'm ready to solve that first example. So I have 4 plus a negative 3. Remember, addition, we always start at 0. I have a positive 4, so I'm going to move forward 4 spaces. End of my first trip. And then I'm going to pick up right where I left off, and I'm going to go backwards, because this is a negative 3 units. And it looks like I am ending this problem. All of my trips are ending at that positive 1. Alright, I'm looking at my next example. I have a positive 5, so I'm going to start from 0 and move 5 spaces forward. That's the end of my first trip. And then I'm going to continue moving forward because my next integer is a positive 6. And it looks like I'm going to run out of room on this number line, but we know that my next spot right here is going to be a positive 11. And that's where my last trip is going to end. So my final answer here is a positive 11. Alright, my third example has a negative 7 and I'm adding a negative 3. So my first integer is a negative number. I'm going to go backwards 7 spaces. That's the end of my first trip. And then my second trip is a negative 3, so I'm going to continue moving backwards in reverse 3 integers. And I'm going to end at that negative 10. That's the difference here. Alright, I'm looking at my last subtraction example. When I changed it to an addition problem, I had negative 8 plus a positive 2. So remember, addition always starts at 0. I'm going to draw my line going up. And that negative number tells me that I'm moving backwards in my car. So I'm going to draw my first arrow, that first trip, going back to negative 8. And then my second trip is a positive number, so I'll move forwards. And I'm going to go forwards 2 spaces. And it looks like this trip is ending at a negative 6. So negative 6 is my solution to this problem. Alright, so now we have learned how to add and subtract using number lines and our integers. If you need to go back, you can always rewind the video and go back to whatever you missed in your notes, or if you need to review one of these pieces. In our next video, we're going to learn how to multiply and divide.